All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right. Well, I'm excited and delighted to be here. So for the time that we have, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I get excited and I can go about this history for days and years and months, but I'm sure we all have other things to do, so I'm going to try to provide as much as I can provide with the time that we have, and I always enjoy the Q&A. So at the end, if anybody has any questions, if anybody has any reflections or anything like that, I am most certainly willing to address those and talk about those things. As Ann said, I have spent some time in a number of places. Howard County Public School System is one. I grew up in Howard County. All right, I was talking earlier before we got started. I grew up in Howard County. Let me see here. I went to Howard County Public Schools. All right, Laurel, Columbia, and Ellicott City were the three places within Howard County. I attended First Baptist Church of Guilford growing up, and my father was a minister and a preacher and a pastor. Howard County is very dear to my heart. Later on, I would graduate college and go into the school system, but once I left the Howard County Public School System in 2022, I spent 1 year as a curator and a historian at the Howard County Center of African American Culture, located in Columbia. Some of us may be familiar, right off Vantage Point, right at the intersection of the Vantage Point and Little Patuxent Parkway. And then after that, I transitioned to Howard Community College, where I serve as a professor and the assistant director for the Silas Craft Collegians program. And that program is actually being acknowledged and celebrated in 2025 this year for 25 years of excellence. And I also want to thank you, sir, for making sure that the sound is good, all right? So can everybody hear me clearly? Okay, good. And Mr. Carl, the visuals are good for you? Okay, all right. And can everybody, how well can we see that? Okay, so I want to make sure before we go forward, everybody's good to go. So we need to adjust some lighting, get the audio, okay? Okay, I see that helped us, some of us in the room, all right. Howard County history through the lens of African American experiences. But we're not just going to speak to African American experiences of Howard County. We are going to get into that, but I also wanted to insert in the lecture and in the talk of the time that we have the component of healing, the element and importance of community, and taking all of this history and all of this research and all of these things that have been unveiled and uncovered, and ask the question, where do we go from here? All right? So I want us to be thinking. I will be here also at the end, so when we finish, if there's any other questions, reflections, or thoughts, feel free to come to me. And I've already learned a lot from some of you in the room already. I've already jotted down resources and leads and notes about things you've shared with me. So we're going to take this journey together, all right? This is cut off a little bit, so I'm going to summarize what is here on this screen. A special acknowledgement is granted to Indigenous peoples past, present, and future as the traditional protectors and caretakers of their native land in what is known today as the United States. Acknowledged today are the ancestral lands of the various Piscataway and Susquehanna tribes, as well as the historic presence of those forced to relocate from their ancestral lands over time. I also want to give a special recognition for those of African descent, those individuals and those populations throughout the diaspora whose legacy still lives on despite historic and ongoing violence and oppression. Their ongoing resilience, which we'll speak about today, can serve as an inspiration to each and every last one of us. And I wanted to start with this because all of us are birthed into a world based on people who came before us. We inherit the policies. We inherit the climate. We inherit the decisions and the different things that people went through and endured before we got here. So I wanted to take time to just be intentional and acknowledge those who inhabited this soil, this turf, and this terrain before we would come later. I want to open up with a question. All of us are here in this room, and I'm sure all of us are here perhaps with different levels of curiosity, perhaps different reasons why we're here. But this is an open question to anybody who wants to answer. What does history mean to you? What does history mean to you? And as
the reason we are.
It's the reason we are?
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in on that? What does history mean to you? Got something?
You know, that's not a fair question. I'm going to follow this story for Howard County as well. For me, history is telling the stories, the long forgotten stories of why, the hows, and building on where we can go with that information from here and connecting point A to point B. Your area and my area, I grew up in Western Howard County. So the history of Western Howard County is a lot different than the history of, say, Laura or early Columbia.
That's right, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that as well. Anybody else want to chime in on that? What does history mean to you? Yes?
Learning.
Learning? Absolutely. And well, I appreciate your perspective and everybody's perspective. And I think that oftentimes when it comes to that review process, and we're seeing this now in many facets of the country, in the political arena, in the educational arena, that review, sometimes people are kicking and screaming, not wanting to reassess and critically examine and perhaps unlearn some things that have been told. And so as a historian, such as myself and Ms. Deb and others, it's actually, especially in this day and age, quite a bold position to be in, because a historian holds a lot of power, because they have a lot to do with how those generations after us and those in the present will look at prior times. So history is very, very impactful. History affects us all. And so I wanted to start with that. And I also wanted to bring in a few other perspectives in the room, the likes of one individual who was an influential black leader. His name is Marcus Garvey. He facilitated and organized and led the largest organization for black folk called Universal Negro Improvement Association, or the UNIA. And his aim and goal was to foster a sense of pride and empowerment for black folk amidst racism, hostility, and other things. And he says this, quote, "A people without knowledge of their culture or history is like a tree without roots." So how many people in the room have a green thumb? How many planters? People spending time out in the garden. Okay? Right? So when it comes to plants or trees or vegetation, those roots are important, yes? Those roots serve as the foundation. You know, those roots, though they might be tucked underneath that soil, if the wind blows, that tree or that plant is anchored into that ground. And so history is the same way, I believe. History gives us a firm rooting. It helps us understand who we are, where we've been and where we come from. And that takes us to this quote right here. It might be a little bit blurry, but I'll read it for us so we can be able to hear what is being said. And this quote is from Dr. John Henrik Clarke, and he said these words, quote, "History is a clock that people use to tell their cultural and political time of day. It is a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography." So history helps us orientate ourselves or find ourselves in society. History is important. History reflects our memory. How many of us have ever went to the store, was out running errands, and we parked only to leave the store, and then we trying to figure out, where did I park? Where's my car? Right? And then so it's happened to me, and then I take my keys and I try to push the button so that where it can sound. Oh, there it is right over there, right? History is like that. History guides us. History gives us a roadmap. But the challenge is, how can we have an inclusive history that brings into account as many experiences, perspectives, and backgrounds as possible? And in many spaces, that's a very difficult concept and idea to grasp. So hopefully it can be heard. This here is an excerpt from out of a significant work, History of Blacks in Howard County. And so when we talk about history, its value and its importance, I wanted to let one of our beloved elders speak and give her take on why history matters and why history is important. All right? Short little clip. Check it out.
History is important because it gives you roots. None of us is an isolated entity. We came from somewhere, and whatever that somewhere is, it has roots that are important to us. We need to know what our parents did, what our grandparents did, what they thought about, the problems that they came through. Many times we don't understand why our parents treat us the way we do, or the way they do, unless we understand the trauma as well as the joy that they have experienced throughout their lifetime. History gives us roots.
Okay. Thank you. I think everybody, she put it very eloquent, and she said it well. History gives us roots. History helps us understand where we come from, and as Maya Angelou said, we don't know where we're going unless we know where we come from. Okay? And history is always speaking to us. History is always around us. I say if you want to hide something from somebody, just put it up under their nose. All right? We are living history vessels engaging with history. Oftentimes, we may not even know it or may not be aware. And I'm sure many of us in the room are aware and might know it. But I would say many don't. So the other day, I was just driving by throughout the county, and I noticed there were quite a few namesakes and signs and different things that had the Banneker name. Benjamin Banneker. So history is always talking to us. Howard County, such and such hall, the name of this school. And we can even personalize it. Whatever our last names are, or our first names, where did that name come from? How did we get here? So history is very, very significant. So what does the data say? So talking to those from the Visit Howard County office, Howard County Tourism Council, in 2021 they did a report, and they actually did a survey to pretty much get an idea and to get a grasp of those people who come to Howard County and come around these parks. What are their top motivations? What are the main reasons why they come here? And after they polled close to 300 people, they was able to find that 68% of those who come and visit Howard County come because they want to interact and engage with local history, and they also want to learn more and connect with historic sites. So we see that even people coming to this area are having an increased growth in wanting to learn about history. Some more data for us to reflect on when we think about history and the impact of history, the significance of history, the importance of history, is that since the COVID-19 pandemic, there has actually been an increase and a surge in genealogy, family history research. So I just started out trying to get my feet wet and dip my toe into the pool of genealogy and family research. But let me just get a show of hands. How many of us are perhaps in the process of learning more about family history, doing a little bit of genealogy? Okay. And so, as the data suggests, with the articles and with the research that is out there, people are watching Henry Louis Gates, Find My Ancestor, and they're getting subscriptions to Ancestry.com and Newspaper.com. They're doing the DNA test. But one of the things that I found really insightful about this surge in genealogy and people wanting to connect with history on a personal level is that one woman says, quote, and this is from an article that was produced talking about it. She said, quote, tomorrow isn't promised. One woman realized in the midst of a COVID-19 fever, committing herself to find her biological father. Another excerpt from the article, quote, the pandemic may be fueling even more desire to search, pointing to an upsurge in adoptees and others seeking genetic kin, and to reports from Ancestry about a significant increase in subscribers to its genealogical archives compared to the same period last year. So connecting with relatives, family members, loved ones, so on and so forth. So history is on the rise, and people are engaging with it in different ways. Going a little bit further, and there's a book that I forgot to bring in here with me. I left it in the car by mistake. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. The Body Keeps the Score. When we think about history, history is not just some thing that we can crack open a book and read about. History is not necessarily a lesson plan. Or it's not even coming to the lecture to hear Marcus Sankofa talk. History is much more profound than we can ever imagine. And so when we think about history, what we experience from childhood, what we experience on into our coming of age years, adulthood, on top of what we have learned, on top of our environment, and all the other factors affects us physiologically. So I just mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic and how that was one of the things that led to people saying, you know what, life is really short. So while I have time on this green and blue earth, I'm going to try to uncover a little bit more about who I am, where I come from. And so when you have groups of people who have been through certain things, or all of us have been through different experiences, shapes, and molds who we are, but our experiences just don't come and go. The stuff that we experience stays with us. I have bumps and boo-boos and scrapes on my knee from when I played when I was a child. So the stuff that we go through, what we're taught, our circumstances, even trauma, all of this stuff shows up in the body. Now, how deep does this thing go? Well, it gets very deep, everybody. Because, see, sometimes we think it's what we eat, and yes, there's a lot of things that affect our health. So not just history, what we eat, the people that we surround ourselves by, lifestyle. But there's data that also talks about individuals or groups of people who have been through racism, being denied certain rights, being denied certain opportunities, being enslaved, these different experiences, these things also affect the body, and the brain is a part of the body. So we're talking about history, our history, and how that affects our immune system, how that affects our muscles, our ligaments, our joints. It even affects how we think, our worldview, how we process stuff. So history is really, really a big, big deal. And it affects us more than we realize and more than we think. And the research from Nadine Burke-Harris even goes deeper into this. And this is something that I discovered working with young folks. I know Ms. Deb, you know all about that. The research that Nadine Burke-Harris provides says young folk, based on what their experiences are, if there's abuse of any kind, of any sort, or any hostilities or challenges or issues, and here's some of the examples. It could be mental illness or substance abuse or divorce or so on and so forth, an incarcerated loved one. These things affect health outcomes. It affects life expectancy. It affects all types of health indicators, making individuals more susceptible to certain diseases and ailments. And one of my favorite quotes of all is one by the James Baldwin, the writer, the social critic. He said these words, quote, "History is not the past, it's the present. We carry our history with us." Okay? But then there's also this notion called post-traumatic growth. And that very much is a reason why people are starting to get subscriptions to Ancestry. There is a such thing as post-traumatic growth, which also speaks to why people are trying to take their health more serious now. The research of post-traumatic growth says that those who have the propensity to successfully recover from trauma or stress or trying life circumstances develop a certain outlook based on the meaning they develop about the situation. And that's why I started off this talk asking everybody in this room, well, what does history mean to you? They say, life is what you make it. And so, even in a space like this, these panels, these walls, what is the meaning? What is the interpretation? What are the perspectives that emanate from those walls? Okay? And so post-traumatic growth, how do we make meaning of our life and our experiences? I'll get back to that. So, we just had Memorial Day, and I would say this is a really good book. It's called Unforgettable Sacrifice, How Black Communities Remembered the Civil War. It's by a friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Hillary Green. It speaks to how African Americans led the way in helping the country shape and form its Memorial Day celebrations, recognizing those who were in the Civil War. And then we have Juneteenth, which is coming up in the next coming days. So when we talk about commemorations and traditions, these are some of the ways we can commemorate the past. So in my family, my Uncle Harold, who passed away years ago, when we have our family reunions, one of the things that we did in honor of him was have the Harold Maurice Bennett Memorial Bowling Tournament, because he loved to bowl. All right? He loved to bowl. And he was a big Los Angeles Lakers fan. And so we had shirts made that were purple and gold. And so we bowled. I'm not a very good bowler, everybody. But we did it to honor him. Okay? Some of the other things that people are doing, creating an altar, establishing new traditions, whatever those things might be, going to grave sites, photo albums, or using your social media platform to recognize and honor somebody who has passed on. starting up a business in their honor, reminiscing about funny times, or naming something after somebody, such and such junior, such and such senior, right? Writing a book about their legacy, or paying homage to them with the arts or music, creating a slideshow, documenting their story, telling their story to others. So these are just a few examples of what you can do. And I know many of us probably already know some of this, but these are just reminders and ways in which history can be used as a vehicle to heal and push through. There's another individual who has a fascinating story as to what she has done when it comes to commemorating and honoring those that have come before her. All right, and I will let her tell the story. Mr. Carl, I'm going to give this to you again. And she'll talk about what she has done to invoke meaning in her life as it pertains to history.
I am obsessed with collecting African American history, and it is my enjoyment. It soothes my soul.
It's described as one of the most important collections of African American history ever assembled, but it's not found in any museum. It's housed in the Staten Island, New York home of 90-year-old Elizabeth Meters. For the past 60 years, this former New York City school teacher has been assembling artifacts that document the entirety of the African American experience, from the nation's beginning to the current day.
This is a display of abolition and slavery,
Telling stories filled with tears and triumphs, with one mission in mind.
My mission in collecting this particular African American history collection is to create a patriotic healing and teaching instrument to compensate for the fact that as a teacher and just as an ordinary citizen, I know that African American history has been completely omitted from American history.
Meters' African American History Trust collection features over 20,000 individual items.
And over here we have an authentic baton that belonged to Cad Calloway. Here's a photograph picture of him with his baton making great music.
There are personal letters from historic icons.
This is a Martin Luther King signed civil rights letter.
And memorabilia from the world of sports.
Over here we have a life-size wax figure that came out of a wax museum of Hank Aaron, an important iconic African-American sports hero. In this corner we have a bronze statue of Joe Louis, and on the bottom a pair of Muhammad Ali's fight-worn shoes.
The items filled every nook and cranny of Meters' home, and that's not an exaggeration. But as she enters her 90s, Meters made the tough decision to part ways with her collection by putting it up for auction, not as individual pieces, but sold intact.
You know, even collectors reach the end of the road, and when you're as old as I now am, it's important to take on the responsibility of making sure that it has another life.
Elizabeth Meters' collection is nothing short of extraordinary.
Arlen Edinger is the president of Guernsey's auction house.
I haven't seen anything like it before, nor have I seen anything like it since. A collection that comprehensively documents the African American experience in ways that much smarter people than I, much more knowledgeable people than I, think is the finest collection of its type in existence. So it's overwhelming.
Over here I have weaponry from the Civil War.
Estimates of the collection's value vary, but it could be worth as much as $10 million.
I'm shocked that a Pokemon card can go for $1 million and Marilyn Monroe's dress can go for $5 million. And so my question really is, how much does America value American history? I have no idea. And I have only a prayer that I send out with this collection.
And, Meters obviously wants to keep it intact. That auction is going to start next month at Guernsey. It's really interesting. She took odd jobs to finance this, mortgaged her house a few times, and it started with admiration for Jackie Robinson, and it just inspired her to keep going.
It's amazing how much she's focused on the next generation and making sure all of this stuff ends up in the right hands.
For
would say.
When was that done?
So that was done a few years ago. I think it might have been 3 or 4 years ago. And what I've tried to do is actually track and see what happened to the collection, but I've hit a brick wall. I feel like I can't really get to anything more recent than 2023. And even when I get there, it just says she's trying to sell her stuff. But I don't know to who, where, if she's had any success.
Still alive? Is she still alive?
I have not seen anything that says she is not. So if anybody wants to dig, by all means, go right ahead, because I would love to know what happened to that precious collection. Do you have any thoughts about that? Any thoughts or about what you just saw there in terms of what she's doing to commemorate the past? I think all museums need to be thinking about, historical societies, having a succession plan for your objects and for your collectibles. But no, I do agree. Why don't more people know about her collection? So I would say she's a curator, and I would definitely give her that credit. She is a curator, as we see what she has remarkably done in her home. But the larger point that I wanted to circle back to before I showed that was how we can engage with history to make it meaningful for us. And she is a great example of a person doing just that. So, what are the lessons we can learn through Black experiences? What are the lessons? So we talked about the lens of the lens of Howard County through the lens of African Americans. And we spent time talking about the impact of history, the importance. So now I want to shift gears a little bit and get into some specifics. Get into some details and get into some case studies. So what are the lessons that we can learn? Well, one of the things that was so upsetting to me when I graduated from Morgan State University, 2021, master's degree in African American Studies, I was tasked to write a master's thesis. And this is it that I'm holding in my hands, and Miss Deb actually gave me some information to put in these 164 pages. But what I found that was so disappointing was when I was doing my research and digging and reading up on stuff, it was so easy to see African Americans painted in a position of victimhood, victimization. And so, as today we give African American folk their agency, their humanity, yes, there have been institutional barriers, and there still are. And yes, there have been blocks, and yes, there have been things that have denied their basic rights. But I wanted to spend time today speaking to the overcoming. I wanted to speak to the triumph and what they were able to do despite all of the things that were thrusted their way. And so, tenacity. What are the things that we can take from the African American experience? Well, locally here in Howard County, how many of us have heard of a person named Silas Craft or Dr. Silas Craft? Yes. And as I said before, I'm honored to stand before you as the assistant director of the program Silas Craft for Legions of Howard Community College. Dr. Silas Craft actually attended one of the historic Black churches in Howard County, First Baptist Church of Guilford, and he came here around 1944 or so. And Cooksville High School was actually where he initially was the principal before he transitioned to the place that you see right here, serving as a principal of Harriet Tubman Junior Senior High School. Harriet Tubman Junior Senior High School would become, under his principalship, the first school in Howard County that would take African Americans all the way to the 12th grade. Am I correct?
First one.
First one. Because before then, they only could go to the 11th grade. In Howard County, there were all types of inequities. And so what I have here is an old school attendance sheet dating back to 1912. 1912. And I was given this attendance sheet by one of the former students of Harriet Tubman Junior Senior High School. And this right here is an attendance sheet that I was given from, and I think this was a school in Highland. And it was a color school, and I was told that this school only went up to the 4th grade. And if you look on the attendance sheet, and it's hard to see, but there's a section on here that has the ages of the students. So on here you have age 10, age 9, age 8, 6, 13. So for those who know about ages and how that builds in the educational world, if you have a 6-year-old in a room with a 13-year-old, you basically have an elementary school or kindergarten child with a high school student or an 8th grade going into high school student. Why? Because these schoolhouses were overcrowded. We're talking about students had to walk many, many miles, sometimes without even shoes, stepping on sticks, rocks, glass, pebbles, and all sorts of things, to the point where when they got home that evening from school, their parents had to massage their feet. We're talking about no buses being granted until what, the late 30s or something similar. Even after that. And we're talking about even when the bus was granted, a bus where it was 2 hours that had to get, it took 2 hours to get to that Harriet Tubman Junior Senior High School one way. So these are the historic inequities. However, many of those students did not give up. Dr. Silas Craft made sure that those students had the books they deserved, had the support they deserved. And yes, they wrote letters to the school board, but the school board oftentimes would respond, if they would respond. They would respond and say, oh, well, there's a leak in the roof, just put a bucket under there and keep on moving. What I have here is a yearbook. And I was told by doing oral history interviews with those who attended Harriet Tubman Junior Senior High School that no white publisher, and you can even pass it around, that's fine, no white publisher would even publish a yearbook from a colored school, so the family members and those who were the teachers in the black community had to pull their resources together to do it on their own. Tenacity. So Cyrus Craft is one who is a significant, towering figure when it comes to the experiences of African Americans who paved the way for many. Yes, Ms. Deb.
Just
in fact,
one of reference with that book that you're passing around, the ladies that wrote that book, Jean James, she was born in Coatesville. As a matter of fact, my grandmother delivered her. My grandmother was a midwife, and it was a set of twins, Jean and Joan.
that's right.
And Jean Smith put all those books together with money out of her pocket and people who had saved things from Cookesville to Harriet Tubman. They donated pages, and Jean has typed a lot. I think I have a yearbook from 1941 at Cookesville. But what happened is there were more women. I don't know if you found that out. There were more women who finished at Cookesville because by grade 8, those young men were needed to work farms. So a lot of women did not get the education that the earlier women did.
That's right. And then also talking to some individual, they said that for the young men sitting up all big in that class with the smaller children, some of them weren't really that comfortable. But I appreciate you adding that. There's so much. And let me just say this. We're not going to have time to even get to all that can be said. But let this be a touch point to help us continue to further do the history and do the research. Thank you for that, Ms. Deb. And here we have it. Here we have it. In terms of the busing, in terms of secondary education being granted, in terms of the inequities, in terms of the colored children going to school compared to the white children, colored school 7 months, the white children 10 months. And it wasn't just overcrowding, but lack of funding, physical conditions, and lack of resources. But I was even told when I sat on the couch and talked to some who attended the school, and when I told them, when I was giving those stories and recording what they had to say, they said that even though the school board might not have given those students what they deserve, parents and families made sure that they ate every day. The parents and families made sure that they had lunch, that they had all the things that they need. And so that right there is representing community, if nothing else. What else can we take from the experiences of African Americans in Howard County? We can take pioneering. This individual here named Herman Charity was mentored by Dr. Silas Craft. And he became in 1968 the first African American police officer to enter into the police force. He said he had to go to Baltimore for movies and restaurants, but he said at Tubman, it was the spirit of family and community through and through. And they always are willing to help with your work and with your academics. And he said that they would even stop by his house. He said that wasn't good for him, because if he was messing up, they would stop by. But it just spoke to the spirit of community. Mr. Herman Charity. Play a little clip for you there.
I had an English teacher that produced an essay that I wrote back in middle school that said I want to be a police officer. So I guess that was the first indication to my family and friends that I wanted to become a police officer. At that time, it was like 1968, so it was still part of the civil rights movement, the Black Party movement, that type of thing. The Black Panthers were out doing their thing, and the other civil rights movement was doing a separate thing. Well, anyway, I got some backlash from some of my friends who thought that it wasn't the best place for a black person to be at that time, back in the 60s. Martin Luther King just got assassinated and things like that. So I was a little reluctant to really consider the job during that time, but again, it's supporting my family, other friends that went on to do police department. I've heard people say from anybody I've ever seen, and I've heard a lot of guys back in the day, if you had 2 years on the job, well, they're going to throw their food at you right there because there wasn't a lot of seniority behind us. So, the Herman was best I told my sergeant or lieutenant, I said, he let it go. And he got out of that car and got in a good car and never came back. And he moved quickly around. I'm proud of him. I really am. Rick told me that he was going to be rough going because some of the white officers didn't want me there. But he told me that I had to stay because he made the rough with anybody else of color who wanted to be on the police department.
So it took a lot of courage for him to take that step to come into police because he encountered not only internally some of the concerns white officers had, but he also had to deal with people in his community, in the African American community, that felt that that wasn't the best choice to make for a career. But he was certainly a trailblazer for taking that step and opening the door for others. We want the agency to reflect the community that it serves and protects, and that helps to build trust within the community. So taking that step for him was big, but not only for him, also for his department and also for the Howard County community. So we're glad he did.
That's his uniform there on display.
Honored, humbled that something that I wanted to do. Back in 1968, and back to this, I appreciate being recognized by the other groups in my habitat.
Right. So, so he's another example of that tenacity and being a pioneer. And so, not sure if many of us have heard of who Mr. Herman Charity is, a good friend of mine. He attended Harriet Tubman Junior Senior High School and was mentored by Dr. Kraft. And once again, knew Miss Jean and Miss Joan, James and Hash, and all of those who are connected. So I would say for those in the room, if you haven't had a chance to go to the Harriet Tubman Junior Senior Harriet Tubman Cultural Center now it's called, definitely go. All right, it's open, there's an exhibit in there. You can explore the walls and get a lot of rich history that we're talking about today. So definitely go check it out, all right? Not too much more here, but I did just want to raise up a few other pioneers of excellence before we can take questions. Captain Milt Taylor, and when I was working in the museum, the Howard County Center of African American Culture, his story was shared with me from a family member. And from one who was actually connected with him. He actually would be Maryland's first black state trooper, and he hailed from Elkridge. And he would go in 1957. But the thing that's interesting about Mr. Taylor is you look here, and you see a picture of him in the vehicle. He's got his uniform on. He looks like he is holding something. I'm not sure what he's holding there. Maybe a phone or something. I don't know what that might be. He has a hat on. But it took him years and years to be able to even have the opportunity to wear the uniform. So from what I understand, he was, yes, able to enter into the ranks. But because of who he was and the color of his skin, he still had to wait years and years and years before being able to do that. That was just a photo op, but that was not the reality of what he would do day in and day out. Roger Sylvester Carter. For some of us who might have traveled here, you might have even passed the Roger Carter Center on the way here. And Roger Carter was very close and tight with Dr. Cyrus Crabb. From what I was told, and this is also in that blue book of African and Blacks in Howard County, there was a black Negro baseball team, and Mr. Kraft and Mr. Carter was on the same team. Am I right? Yep. And so one of the things that is so compelling to me when I first heard this was a story that Mr. Carter had no opportunities to get educated formally in Howard County. And so he would get up early in the morning and he would actually walk to PG County, Lakeland High School, just to get his diploma. And he did it. He didn't quit, he didn't give up, but he persevered and he used his resilience to be able to get his diploma. But when he got older, when he became an adult, he ended up having his own bus service called Carter's Bus Service, so other children would not have to go through what he went through as a child. He said, quote, "We were so poor, I had to graduate from high school with a pair of shoes borrowed from a neighbor in Guilford." And so Guilford is one of the many influential historic black communities in Howard County. All right, that's his wife there, Agnes, who was with him each step of the way. And this is the recent Roger Carter Center. My daughter, who actually was taking some Saturday art classes for little children there about a couple years ago, I went in there for the first time. I looked around, I looked on the walls, and didn't see any picture of Roger Carter. And so I went to the receptionist, or the person at the front desk, and said, "Is there any pictures, images?" Because I knew who he was, but I didn't see anything. And unfortunately, those who happened to be there at the time did not know who he was. So once again, history is all around us, but what good is it if we don't know history? Knowing even that gives us a whole new meaning of the place, even just knowing that tidbit of history. Does that make sense? Absolutely. So there you have it. And then we have Fells Lane, which is right in these neck of the woods. Togetherness. I had a chance to interview Mr. Tyrone Tyler, who hails from the Fells Lane community. And so he talked about just a sense of togetherness and the sense of solidarity that was there at that historic Lane community. He said there would never be, or there was in an interview it was said there would never be another neighborhood like this. In the original neighborhood, everybody was connected. It may have been an eyesore to some, but it was our eyesore. And that quote is there because it made national headlines, even reaching all the way to Jet magazine as being reported as the nation's smallest black ghetto. So we see the power of narrative, the power of story. However, even though the housing discrimination was there and the segregation and the poverty and all of these inequities were still there, the housing issues, they still found a way to have joy. They still had community and they took care of each other. And this here is a newspaper clipping of one of the things that they had in the community, a tradition where they would get together and clean the sidewalk. And it says right here, boys and girls on Fells Lane assist in the cleanup and then rest on the steps and enjoy the results of their labors among the flowers and shrubs their parents have planted. All right? So despite the barriers, despite challenges, they still enacted their agency and had a spirit of community. These are the things that we can take through those lenses of the African American experiences. They had establishments that people even outside Fells Lane would come and convene. The Carter's local bar and other places. I'm going a little bit quick for the sake of time. But Kaplan's, I was told that Kaplan's, which is within walking distance right down the hill, that was one of the few places that some of those African Americans in Fells Lane would go to shop. So history, it's all around us. Some of us in the room may already know that, all right? But when I discovered that, I had been past plenty of times and said, oh, that place right there. I was just totally wild, all right? And then what we find is whether it's Fells Lane or a community called Jessup or whether it's Cooksville, Howard County has been known to have a number of influential, significant, prominent black communities. And what I was told was when Columbia was built in the late 60s and when it was getting established, a number of these black communities suffered because some moved and migrated to Columbia. Even some of the churches, the collection plate and the offering got a little bit thin. But here we have it. Alpha, Jessup, Daisy, Folly Quarter. Some of these are even names of schools. Bushy Park, North Laurel, Waterloo, Meadow Ridge, West Friendship, Mount View, Clarksville, Atholton, Dorsey, Marriottsville, Simpsonville, Ilchester, Lisbon, Jonestown. These are black communities, but oftentimes nobody's talking about them. Right? Here's some historic black churches, and I know that these are not all the black churches, let me be very clear, but these are some of them. What we also can surmise are institutions, black institutions. All right? Even Mount Zion and St. Luke, which is also right around here as well, too. When we talk about institutions, some of us may not be aware of the African Art Museum of Maryland, which would get established in 1980. Shout out to Miss Doris Ligon, who is still mighty and going strong, though she's small in stature. She established the museum as the first in Columbia, especially that would devote itself to Africa. The cradle of civilization and the birth of humanity. And she wanted to make sure that her masks and her sculptures and all that she had was recognized and learned by everybody who came into her midst. So she used to be a plant, one who dealt with plants, but then she changed and ended up collecting collectibles and commemorative items. The Black Student Achievement Program, the program that I worked for when I was in the Howard County Public School System, which is a very significant institution emanating from the African American experience in Howard County, because Ms. Gloria Washington Wallace said when that program was established, she wanted to ride on the wings of the same spirit and the same energy of the Harriet Tubman Junior Senior High School. And to this day, the Black Student Achievement Program, or how it's affectionately known, BSAP, is still supporting students. And then we have the Howard County Center of African American Culture. Miss Wiley Sims Birch, a Louisiana native, who in the basement of her home collected souvenirs and ephemera and busts and all types of collectibles and commemorative items, grew her collection to the point where she went into an actual facility as she moved with her family. And then in 1986, this became the Howard County Center of African American Culture. So as I get to an end, and I appreciate everybody giving me your time and your listening ear, I just wanted to just recap a few things, and then I'll open it up if anybody has any questions or reflections. History is connected to everything we do. History is connected to everything we do. Street signs, names of parks, our own family namesake, the clothes we're wearing, somebody who invented the folding chair. History is connected to everything. Number two, history is more complex than we could ever imagine. And things that we think are simple are not that simple. All right? So we must keep researching, we must keep digging. Next, history can have significant impacts on our health and wellness. Those impacts can be positive and those impacts can be negative, but the good news is we can do some things to make meaning out of our experiences and to heal and push through. Next, Black experiences are human experiences. So when we talk about through the lens of African Americans, regardless of what color, race, nationality, ethnicity you are, you hear the story of Silas Craft, or you hear the story of Roger Carter, or you hear the story of Milt Taylor, or you hear all these stories, we all can gain something from those experiences and apply those things to our life. Next, we all have blind spots, which is why it's so important for us to continue to learn, and why it's so important for us to continue to grow and educate ourselves. We must reflect on ways we can engage in history and be an agent of social change. So now that we know a little bit more, let's go share these stories so that way others can be aware of many of the things that are not talked about. And then lastly, purchase my book. Now, I don't have a book yet. I'm in the process of writing one. All right? Yeah, oh yeah. But the goal is to be finished by this year. And so a lot of the things that you had a chance to check out here, just a little appetizer, little teaser. And more will be coming when the book is actually produced. But nevertheless, I just want to thank you all once and for all. I appreciate your time and your listening ear. We made it through the technological glitches when they came, but nevertheless we did it. History is everywhere. We are living history. So that being said, here's my information if you want to reach out. Thank you so much, everybody.